your insight all the way from UK. Now we move on to our next news. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says peace with Arab neighbors could be near, while reiterating that Iran's nuclear program has been set back several years. This comes after Netanyahu, during his visit to Washington, said that Iran's supply of enriched uranium remains a major concern, despite the Israeli military's 12-day aerial campaign last month targeting Iranian nuclear and military sites. Netanyahu admitted that the operation did not deal with Iran's enriched uranium stockpile and stated that Iran shouldn't get it. He also emphasized that although enriched uranium is not enough to make atomic bombs, it remains a critical component and Israel wants that element under control. Meanwhile, according to reports, a senior Israeli official has said that Israeli intelligence shows Iran's uranium stockpiles from Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan had not been moved before the nuclear sites were struck by the U.S. last month. The official, however, did say that access to the stockpile in Isfahan may still be possible. The complete stockpile from the three sites was estimated at 400 kilograms, enriched to 60%. Now we're joined by Jordan Cope. He's a Middle East expert joining us from Texas, U.S. Thank you for joining us today. With Prime Minister Netanyahu claiming peace with Arab neighbors is near, how realistic is this claim amid continued tensions with Iran, also with Gaza?
It's very possible that some sort of agreements are indeed near. Netanyahu recently met with the head of state of Mauritania while in Washington, D.C., a country that, while used to having relations with Israel, suspended such relations after the 2008-2009 war. It was rumored that Mauritania might have been one of the countries that was considering joining the Abraham Accords at the end of Trump's first presidency. And it should also be noted that Ahmed al-Shara, the president of Syria, recently met with Sachi Anegbi, the head of Israel's National Security Council, in recent days. Now, some speculate that a full normalization between Israel and Syria might not quite be near in the immediate future. However, a security agreement might be reached, and it's also important to note that some of the conditions for such an agreement have already been realized. Syria ultimately wanted for the United States to recognize the current administration, to remove sanctions, and then on top of that, an optional condition, an optional term of the United States and Trump's executive order to remove sanctions from Syria was the consideration that the U.S. would remove Hayat Tahrir al-Sham from the list of U.S. designated terrorist organizations, that the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham ultimately being the terrorist group from which Ahmed al-Shara was part of the leadership, a Salafi jihadist terrorist group. The fact that the U.S. ultimately removed that designation is ultimately an appeal and an overture to Ahmed al-Shara, and likely an indicator that there's probably something else going on behind the scenes. It's also rumored that in the future, perhaps Lebanon could join the Abraham Accords, and perhaps we might see Saudi Arabia in the more distant future. Regarding Lebanon, what will be necessary for it to join the Abraham Accords is for Hezbollah to be disarmed, which the United States is currently working with Lebanon to help it achieve that. Now, regarding Saudi Arabia, it's rumored that Saudi Arabia might also soon join the Abraham Accords after the war in Gaza ends. And it's also been rumored that another condition necessary perhaps might be the removal of Hamas from power in the Gaza Strip. So it's a very exciting time. There are a lot of rumors circulating. And now that Iran has been dealt a heavy blow in its recent war with Israel, having suffered a lot of losses in terms of RG leadership being eliminated, and in terms of its nuclear facilities having been dealt a serious blow, it's going to be more difficult for Iran to activate its proxies such as Hezbollah, which were dealt a heavy blow in the October 7th war in Lebanon and Syria, and the Houthis, who have been dealt somewhat of a blow in Yemen. It's going to be difficult for Iran once again to disrupt the Abraham Accords, and for Hamas as well to do so. And it should also be remembered that part of the reason Hamas attacked on October 7th was to disrupt impending Abraham Accords and very near Saudi normalization at the time.
And Jordan, how does this growing urgency over Iran's 60% enriched uranium and possible diplomatic breakthroughs with Arab states reshape regional security and the future of Middle East nuclear balance, according to you?
At minimum, it appears that Iran's nuclear program was set back at least 1 to 2 years. The report from Israeli intelligence and one specific official that you referred to earlier in your coverage seems to suggest that the nuclear material, the enriched uranium, enriched up to 60% in Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordow was not removed before Israel and the United States attacked those facilities. And while it's possible that Iran could gain access to the facility and the stockpile in Isfahan, it's very likely that that material was significantly damaged in the attacks by the U.S. And so French intelligence seems to potentially corroborate this, with French intelligence reports also suggesting that it would need ultimately confirmation from the IAEA to ultimately make its assessment as to the status, but its report did not differ too much from that of the Israeli report. So it remains yet to be seen, but the reality is that Iran's nuclear program has been set back, its proxies have been significantly undermined, and its ability to prevent Israel in the future from normalizing with countries such as Saudi Arabia, an existential, which Saudi Arabia has considered Iran an existential threat for many years now. There's nothing really holding back a lot of these countries from forging normalization or open security arrangements with Israel now that Iran has been significantly undermined. However, the war in Gaza likely will need to end in order for some of the countries to join, such as Saudi Arabia, and perhaps even in the future we might see countries such as Indonesia, which hosts the world's largest Muslim population, join. After all, it was rumored that they were considered a possible candidate for joining the Abraham Accords at the end of Trump's first presidency. And personally, I wouldn't be surprised if Saudi Arabia and Indonesia, if they do normalize at the same time to help provide cover and accountability for their administrations who might face some protest at home.
And Jordan, as we both said that Israel has set back, or U.S. has set back Iran's nuclear capacity, but given that Israel's recent military campaign did not neutralize Iran's enrichment uranium reserves, what are the next steps and what are the risks now for Israel's strategy to prevent a nuclear in Iran, enrichment in Iran?
I think we're one step ahead with the question, because it's possible that Israel did ultimately at least significantly damage and possibly even destroy the uranium stockpile that was enriched to 60%. It will ultimately need to be enriched to 90% in order for it to become a nuclear weapon, to be used for a nuclear weapon. However, what appears to be the situation right now is that it's very possible that that stockpile was significantly undermined and potentially destroyed. It's going to take Iran 1 to 2 years at minimum to be able to break out towards a nuclear bomb, and that's significant time for Israel to prepare. Israel, as we know, has a significant amount of Mossad agents currently on the ground in Iran. They were very responsible for helping in the operations in the 12-day war. and in some part for shooting down drones that were being launched by Iran from Iranian soil. It's very clear as well from Israeli intelligence that the Mossad clearly were very close to some of the key leadership in Iran and surely helped direct Israel's successful attacks on Iran's top leadership and top brass in the Revolutionary Guard. And so Iran's a bit handcuffed right now. Israel certainly has some tricks up its sleeves in terms of how to deal with Iran in the future. And as we've learned from the Mossad and its operations with the pagers in Lebanon against Hezbollah, and currently in Iran in the 12-day war, many can have hopefully confidence in Israel's ability to repel future attacks and a future agenda emerging from one of the world's largest state sponsors of terrorism.
Thank you very much, Jordan Cope, for joining us and sharing your insight as Middle East expert.